So we are here with Lacalle, one of the most influential economists. And the topic of this week and the last week has been the new bill of Donald Trump. For your economist perspective, what do you think about it? It's a spending, it's not. How do you see it?
Okay, the big beautiful bill is a lot more than spending and tax cuts. It's got a tremendous amount of deregulation measures that are super important. And I think that we need to pay a lot of attention to the likely fiscal impact of that deregulation. So a lot has been said about the likelihood of increasing the deficit and increasing debt. We need to start by understanding that it's the largest spending cut in US history. We have never seen that kind of spending cut. And this is absolutely critical to start to improve the fiscal situation of the United States. Second, it's not just extending the tax cuts, but adding new tax cuts that are going to be also generating higher growth, higher employment, and better consumption for the US economy. And the deregulation and tariff impact is not considered in most of the analysts and certainly in the CBO's projections. So what I think is that the concerns about deficit spending and the concerns about debt are significantly exaggerated compared with what this bill is likely to provide. No, and if we look at it from a long-term perspective, the most important element is being able to address mandatory spending. So, all in all, is it a perfect bill? No, it's impossible to pass a perfect bill in a country as complex as the United States, in which every congressman is a completely different vote and every senator the same. But it is an absolutely essential bill to defend because the only other alternative in the United States is more spending, more taxes, and even more debt. No? So I think that the objective of the administration is to start this as a milestone that is going to drive, with higher economic growth, to further spending cuts and obviously tax reductions.
We're having some investigation with that bill and says that maybe 2.5 trillion will be to the deficit. How do you see that? Because Ron Paul, Elon Musk, this kind of libertarian perspective have been criticized this kind of bill. How do you see it? Because you have explained that there will be also tax cuts and all that, but how do you see it in the deficit perspective?
Yeah, from the deficit perspective, we need to understand a few things. Number one, all those projections take no assumption of improvement of economic growth, revenues, and investment coming from the tax cuts and deregulation. And I understand that a socialist economist may disregard the Laffer curve, but I would expect that libertarians and that Austrian economists and freedom defenders would at least take some assumptions of improvement coming from the Laffer curve and from deregulation. Second, it is true that it is not an immediate destruction of the deficit. But we also have to understand that the United States is not as easy as, say, Argentina, even Spain. Well, think about this. In Spain, it is virtually impossible to cut the deficit. In France, it is virtually impossible to cut the deficit. This bill cuts the deficit by 1.2 trillion. So we need to understand that it's not perfect, absolutely. In an ideal world, there would be an immediate cut of 2 trillion in the budget. But that's not possible in the current environment. The only way in which it is possible is if this bill is passed and then subsequent years with higher economic growth and an improvement in all the metrics of investment, of real wages, of tax receipts, with that, then there can be higher cuts implemented. I completely understand. I'm a libertarian. If I could, and I'm sure that President Trump would also do it, if I could and I had 100% of the power, I would probably implement a much larger cut. But this is not the way in which the United States works, and certainly the way that Congress and Senate work. So we need to understand it as a very important first step that needs to be defended as the milestone that is going to drive to higher cuts.
We have been talking about the deficit for the people that are not economists or are they didn't teach in all his life economy, can you explain what it is the deficit and why it's so bad?
Well, the deficit means that the government is spending way more than it collects. Therefore, when new governments come afterwards, what happens is that they find themselves already in a situation like the Trump administration has found itself, in which by April, about 50% of the budget has already been consumed. And this is something that in the discussions between President Trump and Elon Musk, etc., very few people talk about, is how much comes from already spent elements, no? Why is it important? It's important to curb the deficit because if that doesn't happen, what we are likely to see in the future is a destruction of the confidence in the US dollar. And at the end of the day, the deficit is printing money. That is what it is. The United States does not need to have a surplus. Does not need to have a trade surplus either, because the deficit of the United States needs to be taken into account considering the global demand for US dollars. But it cannot have any deficit. So it's a very thin line between what is an acceptable level of deficit that provides the dollars that the world demands with the reduction of debt to GDP that allows the confidence in the US dollar and in the sustainability of public accounts to be strengthened.
Trump also did a lot of tariff plans, and you have said several times that it's not just tariff and it's like a gun for negotiate. Can you explain us to us?
Well, the United States does not have the option of playing like China, the European Union, and other countries do with non-tariff barriers. No, for example, the 2030 agenda, the Green Deal, all those things are non-tariff barriers, huge non-tariff barriers against U.S. companies that are used at the same time not only to, let's say, prevent US companies from selling to the European or the Chinese market, but also used politically to exonerate other countries that are politically close from those barriers. In the case of the European Union, Turkey, Morocco, etc., etc. Therefore, what we need to understand is that the Trump administration, just like, by the way, the Clinton, the Bush, or the Obama administration did prior, can only use tariffs as a way to make deals and negotiate an improvement in the conditions of global trade. I always say the following. The United States uses tariffs the same way that it has to have nuclear weapons. You need to have nuclear weapons to avoid a nuclear war. You need to put the threat of tariffs to improve the situation in trade. It doesn't look something that is easy to comprehend if you're only looking at it from a trade perspective. But if you look at it from a trade, geopolitical, and a national security perspective, it's perfectly understandable. So it's basically a tool to make other countries acknowledge that the trade surplus that they have with the United States is not because of the free cooperation between open businesses and open cooperation, but because there is an enormous amount of limits that are imposed on US companies, okay? So once we understand that, it's basically a way of leveling the playing field. Reaching trade deals. With those trade deals, there will be an improvement that is beneficial for both that sign it. And I think that that is the final objective. People that continuously repeat that the Trump administration is only looking to impose tariffs from a Monroean perspective basically don't understand that what is going on is a negotiation, and it's pretty evident that it is a negotiation. No? Why does it have to be this way is what a lot of people ask. Why do you need to be so blunt about tariffs in order to free up the global market? Because there's no other option. Because if you look at what has happened particularly between 2017 and 2024 in global trade, you will see that what we have seen globally is that economies have been closing, and particularly closing themselves against the United States.
You have to mention the Green Deal in Europe. Most of Americans don't know what it's about. Can you explain to the American audience what the Green Deal stands for?
Okay. The new Green Deal in the European Union is a set of policy measures that are aimed at implementing some sort of environmentally friendly central planning. Yeah?
Mhm.
It takes its name, the New Green Deal, from the Roosevelt New Deal. The Roosevelt New Deal is not a good thing to use as a template because it extended the crisis by 6 years by being massively protectionist and hugely interventionist. The New Green Deal is hugely interventionist because it's constantly decided winners and losers without having the technological, the energy, and the capital advantage that, for example, the United States or China have. And the biggest risk of the New Green Deal is that the part of the equation that is not told to citizens is that if it fails, implementing measures to curb demand, to impose limits on individual freedom, on individual consumption, etc., are the parts that, let's say, square up policies that are definitely not going to work and, most importantly, are not working. So the big problem of the New Green Deal is that it is actually delivering the same atrocious results as the Roosevelt New Deal, but, and this is the most important thing, it's not green at all. Because the European Union is importing more Russian liquefied natural gas, is importing more coal, is more dependent on rare earths and on lithium and on copper, etc. So it's basically, I call it a PowerPoint green policy. It looks very, let's say, promising because it looks like we're going to have this fantastic environment of growth and at the same time environmentally friendly policies. But what we end up having is a counterproductive and industry destructing set of policies.
Mhm. Also, talking about the European Union, there are so many debates about after UK did the Brexit. How do you see the economy now in UK? Do you see that they have improved after the Brexit or they are being damaged about leaving the European Union?
The UK has not been damaged by leaving the European Union. The UK has been damaged by itself. We have to remember that the reason why the UK is not doing well is because the UK governments that promised to deliver on the Brexit strategies that were aimed at building a new Switzerland in the UK, lower taxes, more deregulation, improvement in economic freedom, etc., they didn't deliver on that. They actually delivered on the opposite.
Mhm.
One of the big mistakes of conservative UK governments throughout these years is that they basically seem to try to cater to the Labour voter instead of delivering on the Brexit promise. The UK economy is in stagnation, but we also must remember that it's not because it left the European Union, because Germany and France are also in stagnation. So if you compare it to Germany and France in unemployment, in economic growth, in real wage growth, etc., it is doing better. But it's a missed opportunity. It's incredible that the UK had the best opportunity to improve drastically and quickly in economic freedom and missed on that opportunity. In fact, the only prime minister that had tried to implement a serious policy of tax cuts and deregulation and improvement of economic growth was sabotaged immediately, Miss Liz Truss.
Mhm. You, I think that also there is a lot of economists saying that China will be the new world potential and all the stuff. And you have said several times that it won't happen. How do you see China? Because they were saying that China with the new BRICS and all the stuff will take over the United States. What is your point of view of that?
Central planning never works. And I know, because I've lived it, that there is some kind of, let's say, mirage view from economists, from politicians, from media outlets about central planning. I lived it in the 80s, the same thing. In the 80s, all the, let's say, academia, well, not all, obviously, but a very significant part of academia, economists, etc., viewed the Soviet Union with Gorbachev as the great opportunity and the one that would take over. And they saw the United States with Ronald Reagan as a decadent economy. Actually, it was the opposite. No? So the problem of China is central planning. And the problem of China is that all the great things that China has as an economy, that are lots of things: technology, entrepreneurship, great labor force, human capital, all those things are hindered by the fact that the government has been closing the economy since 2008 quite consistently. Capital controls, currency controls, the financial system is completely closed, all of those elements, no? And it's a sort of vendor financing scheme. It basically runs a running to standstill strategy, in which what companies need to do is to produce a lot of things, hoping that they will be exported at some point because the internal demand is not going to work. No? So what China is trying to do is to get, let's say, similar economies around them in order to prop up its vendor financing scheme. But it's very difficult to achieve. Why? Because you cannot build an alternative to the US dollar with a currency that is constructed by a group of serial inflationists. Brazil, India, Russia. Sorry. Furthermore, you cannot be an alternative to the United States when you are imposing central planning, which kills innovation, which kills the most important factor of progress, which is creative destruction. No, so what I see is that the United States will continue to be a global leader. China will continue to be a global leader, but I don't think that it wants to open its financial system. It doesn't want to eliminate capital controls. It doesn't want to eliminate currency fixing. It doesn't want to eliminate central planning, and therefore that never works.
And you are a big fan of Javier Milei in Argentina. He has been the first president that is libertarian. When he entered, the country had double digits in inflation per month, and now he has the stabilization. He did very good in ending with the poor people there. How do you see it as economist and also as a friend, like see Javier Milei leading a country being libertarian? Because it's very strange.
It looks strange, no? But every time that I hear the concept of the Millet experiment, I always remind people that the experiment that we have been living is socialism of the 21st century. That is the experiment, not what Millet is doing. What Millet is doing is economic logic, no? So I find it fascinating that right now the debate is about somebody that is implementing economic logic, and we appeared not to have any type of debate about the absolute insanity that Argentina was living under socialism of the 21st century with Kirchner and her colleagues. So, what do I think about the Milei tenure so far? That has been a resounding success. It's such a success that even the Kirchner supporters are recognizing that they cannot debate about the economy, that they need to debate about other things, but not about the economy. Because for years, the Keynesian, the socialist consensus that we're unfortunately living every day, was repeating the following things. Inflation in Argentina cannot be brought down because it's multifactual. No, the situation in Argentina is completely different because poverty cannot be reduced. So the moment that somebody has implemented the right policies, it not only worked, but it worked very fast. Opening the currency system did not generate any inflation. Reducing the government spending and bringing immediately a surplus did not take the economy to a disaster. All those things are proving what everybody should repeat every day, is that Keynesian economics is a failed type of policy and doctrine that is only aimed at perpetuating and adding government spending and government size in the economy. Therefore, what I think is that he has done a lot. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to do, but he's on the right path, and the results are incredible. The reduction in poverty, the reduction in inflation, the control of public finances, the improvement of the currency, the improvement in the financial situation of a central bank. All of those things are great, but he needs to implement the measures that are going to make it impossible for somebody else, if there was a change in government, to change it all back and continue destroying the economy.
Final question. I know you have written another book, says The New Economic Order. Can you explain us what you say in the book?
Well, we need to fight against the implementation of a new world economic order that is based on 3 pillars. No, number 1 is control of the population via monetary and fiscal repression. Number 2 is the implementation of a self-censorship system in which people are afraid to even give an opinion about the smallest thing just because it may have an impact professionally or personally. And third is the perpetuation of governments that have less and less democratic approaches to their day-to-day actions. Now, authoritarianism is being built through the destruction of independent institutions from the inside. No. And the ones that are doing it are using the words that they try to destroy. They use democracy to impose authoritarianism. They use freedom of expression to impose censorship. They use multilateralism to impose dictatorship. And they use the independent institutions to demolish them. I think that Elon Musk's reaction was a little bit exaggerated, but it's logical that he got a little bit frustrated at the beginning, because if you saw the CBO projections, they looked alarming. But once you take into account that those tax cuts, and he knows it better than anybody else, those tax cuts are going to bring more revenue, they're going to bring more jobs, they're going to bring more growth and more investment. That deregulation is an absolutely critical part of the bill, and that deregulation is going to be essential to bring more investment and therefore higher GDP growth. All of those things are revenue positive. So I think that what is obviously a little bit frustrating is if you think that you could just arrive and on the first year make a drastic cut of $2 trillion, $3 trillion. As a libertarian, I would love to be able to do that, but we need to be realistic. And as a realist, what I have learned is that when a government gives you 50, 60% of good things, you need to accept those good things, go for them, show to people that that is working, and we will see that that works, and then continue down that path. It's so interesting because every time in the media we read that governments need to be very gradual. They need to be gradual. In economy, we always hear that when a government needs to be robust, solid, and decisive, it's about spending and about increasing taxes. Nobody seemed to criticize the largest increase in government spending and in taxes that was presented in the elections by the Kamala Harris team. So what we need to understand is that there has been an absolute milestone in getting Congress and Senate to agree to the largest spending cuts in history and to extend the tax cuts, while at the same time improving in deregulation in a very significant way. So what we should be doing is recognizing those benefits, putting them and starting the bill and getting things working. And once things get working, the economy needs to grow itself out of the fiscal problem. It cannot be only through spending cuts. Everyone from Judy Shelton, good friend of mine, to anyone that understands the US economy, knows that the US economy needs spending cuts and higher growth. Therefore, that is the objective of the big, beautiful bill. Is it perfect? Obviously not. This is politics. Politics is never perfect. But we need to understand where we were going. And where we were going is a lot worse than any of the worst case scenarios. And I think that what's most important is to show to citizens that you can cut the deficit, cut taxes, cut spending, deregulate the economy, and launch a much higher level of growth for the economy. The US citizen has been accustomed to believing that 2% growth is something that is good. No, it's not good. Furthermore, the US citizen has been used to hear that 2% growth coming from massive government spending and massive increase in government hiring is a good economy. I think that this is a bill that starts the process of bringing back the economy to the private sector. That is a bill that starts the process of bringing the economy back to sanity and back to the logic of economic freedom, opening the economy to the private sector, bringing more investment instead of constantly curbing the private sector and increasing the crowding out of the public sector. If we get all those things together, I think that it's our objective to say we need to defend the big, beautiful bill, and we need to continue. And we need to continue, and we need to continue. We need to see it as a first step. I understand that maybe Elon looked at it and thought, I would have wanted everything in a year. And I understand it because he's a businessman and he can do it in his company. However, in Congress, in the Senate, that is not the same thing. The administration needs to show to citizens that supply side economics work. And we just need to look at what happened in the 80s. That worked. It was an absolutely successful and completely undeniable improvement of the economic position of the United States. And we need to see this bill as a first step to achieve that. The deficit is going to come down in 2025. It will come down in 2026 and 2027. And if at the same time the economy grows faster, the private economy is growing faster, investment is rising, and employment is growing, but in the private sector and with real wage growth, then we will see how that first step will lead to a second and a third.
Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel, like my videos, leave your comments below, and keep defending freedom. Thank you very much.